Hello, welcome back to our Art of Communication series. This is workshop two, and I'm really excited to dig into this with you. Once again, my name is Grace McBride, and I have developed these workshops in collaboration with Community Connect South Shoalhaven. I'm going to click share my screen and we will jump in. Okay, so first things first, I just want to make sure that you have your worksheet with you because we'll be working through this together in today's session. So this is what it looks like. We'll click through and we'll see that there are a few slides that we're going to work through together. And let's begin. Okay, so in workshop two, we are going to talk about how to engage your community and the different audiences that you're speaking to. And in order to do that, we need to know exactly who you're speaking to. So today's workshop is all about audience development. Now, when I say audience, what I mean by that is the different groups of people that your organization or group communicates with on a regular basis. Okay, so we've got two goals today. The first goal is to learn how to build audience personas, and the second goal is to learn how to tailor content. So, your communication, your flyers, your emails, your social media posts, all of that is content. We want to learn how to tailor that for those audiences that you need to speak to. So, this is the general rule of today's workshop and today's lesson. And I want you to think about this constantly as we work through today. If you speak to everyone, you speak to no one. When you are trying to speak to your volunteers, your donors, and maybe the people that your organization helps all at once, you're not able to be very specific about what it is you're asking for or how it is that you help, right? And so, in effect, by trying to speak to everybody, you really aren't speaking to anyone particularly. And if you really, really want your message to land, which I know that you do, if you want your communication to be effective, you have to know exactly who you're talking to. Because when you know exactly who you're talking to, you can use language that they connect with. You can paint scenarios and tell stories that they understand. And the more that you do that, the more that you'll connect with them, and the more connection you have, the more they'll be ready to take action and to do what you're asking them to. Now, speaking of taking action, if you really want your audience to take action with you, and by taking action, I mean, everything from signing up to one of your programs or workshops, coming to an event, signing on to be a volunteer, donating money, all of the different things that you need the people that you're communicating with to do, you need to know two other things. You need to know how your audience is likely to interact with the message, so where they're likely to come into contact with it and how they're likely to think about it and perceive it. And two, how you can make taking action even easier for them. Okay. So when you really understand your audience, and we wrap that up by calling it audience insights, your understanding of your audience, those insights, the way that you understand your audience will affect everything you do in your communication. So it'll affect everything from the types of stories you tell and testimonials you share, the timeliness of your communication, when you choose to communicate with them, the messengers, so the people that you might choose to tell your stories and do your communication for you. The types of language you use, how formal versus how casual it is. The content type, is it a video? Is it an email? Those different types of communication. The platforms you use, Facebook versus TikTok. If you're talking just purely about social media platforms there. The messaging spectrum, which I'll get into a bit later today. And also repetition, how often you need to communicate with that audience. So, this is roughly the process we'll be going through today. The first step in starting to really understand your audience is to identify the audiences that you speak to. So, we need to know who you have before we can understand them better. Then we gather all the data sources available to us to learn more about those audiences. We define the audience through a persona questionnaire. We learn how to tailor content for those personas. and then we test and review and scale. So that's the kind of process that we work through. Okay, so before we begin, I just wanted to give you an example of what an audience persona can look like. So this is a persona that I developed in my day job in the last few months. And the audience group that I was told to try and create communications for was farmers living in regional Australia, right? So that's a fairly specific audience, yeah? Well, not really, because when you think about it, um, farmers living in regional Australia, are they men? Are they women? How old are they? What parts of Australia are they from? And when you actually think about that audience more deeply, you realize there's actually maybe 10 or 12 different audience groups you could develop out of that one audience. So for example, um, a farmer living in the Northern Territory, a female farmer living in the Northern Territory, might have very different needs and very different communication styles to, say, a 60-year-old farmer in the Hunter Valley who is, at retirement age versus a 21-year-old farmer in WA who's just young farmer in WA who's just finished ag school. So there's lots of different variations in what might motivate someone, or what kind of environment they're in, or what their wants and needs and challenges are. So there's lots of different subgroups inside one audience. So when you're thinking about your different audience groups, when we get into that in a moment, I want you to think about this. I'll come back to it. But so this was one we developed. This was the climate curious farmer. So we developed lots of different personas. Some were, um, climate change denying farmers, and we had lots of different groups. But this one in particular, the demographics were late 30s to early 50s men, living in a rural agricultural area. You can see their interests, outdoor activities, Australian farming practices. They value hard work, self-sufficiency. Their communication style was really authentic and no nonsense and really solutions oriented. And they want to be communicated to by trustworthy sources. And they were really motivated by providing for their family and the long-term viability of their farm and business. So again, as you look at this persona, you might think, okay, well, this persona, might be really different to, say, a young female farmer who's starting a sustainable or organic farm versus a 55-year-old male farmer in the Northern Territory on a big cattle ranch. So there's just, you can start to see that these people have very different needs. Okay, so with that in mind, I want you to turn to your workbook and start to write down your main audiences. So for a community group, you might just want to start by listing out the basic groups you talk to. So there might be the people that your organization help. There might be the volunteers that help you do what you do. There might be the donors that help fund what you do. So that's three audiences right there. So I want you to pause this video in a second and start to write down all of those different audiences that you interact with or that you communicate with, right? But I want you to be really specific here. So if you have volunteers that are at retirement age, men and women, you might want to put, 60 plus or 55 plus volunteers versus the maybe, if you have volunteers that are between the ages of 20 and 30, you might want to put 20 to 30-year-old volunteers because again, they're going to have very different lives to each other. They're going to have really different motivations, really different challenges that they're facing, and really different, just the practical things, really different abilities to volunteer in different ways. So I want you to pause this video now and I want you to turn to your workbook and just jot down some of the main audiences that you work with. Okay. Are you back? Great. Let's keep going. Okay. Now that you have your different audience groups, we're going to start developing an audience persona. So if you look in your workbook, you'll see that I have a questionnaire here, but I want to go through a bit of information first. So don't start filling that out just yet. Okay, so you'll see in the questionnaire that there are an array of different questions, and I've highlighted three of them here, and I want you to see the kind of different questions I'm asking. So I'm asking all different kinds of questions from who this audience group might listen to. So what voices in the news or in the media or on social media or in the community do they look up to and respect? So, who do they physically do they actually listen to, right? What outcome do you want from them? So what action do you want them to take? So again, if it's someone that your community group is helping, do you want them to come to a program? Do you want them to, join a workshop? What is it that you want versus a volunteer who you might want to sign up to help you at a workshop versus a donor who you might want to donate money or resources. And then we've got more what I would call psychological questions. So things like what keeps them up at night? What do they worry about? What are their fears? And this might seem like a really odd question and really difficult to answer, but I just want you to have a go because the more that you start to really deeply put yourself in the shoes of your audiences, the better you'll understand them and the more you can communicate effectively to them. So we're going to skip through that as our group exercise from the live workshop, but I just want to touch on this point. A lot of people ask me at this point, am I just supposed to make this up? Like, how do I answer these questions? I don't know. So no, you're not really supposed to make this up. One of the biggest mistakes I see is that people will answer these questionnaires and they will do it simply based on their assumptions. There will be data available to you. And what I mean by data is there will be information about your audiences that you already have access to that you can tap into. But it is okay if what you do here is imperfect. Some of this stuff you will have to guess at, but the more that you work on these audience personas and the more data you gather, now that you know you need to be gathering data, the more you can perfect it and get it to work. When I talk about data and gathering data, there are four main ways that I like to do this. Number one is really quite obvious. It's analyzing your own information. So let's say you really want to learn about your volunteers who are in a retirement age. Go to your current volunteers, ask them these questions, or just, think about what you already know about them and use that as a bit of a guide to answer these questions. Interviews and surveys. So again, with that group, you could put together a survey that's, maybe not exactly the same as this questionnaire, but you might want to ask a few key questions like what motivated you to become a volunteer? What do you hope to get out of this? Things like that. You can also run like focus groups or bring a group of people in together for an informal chat. It doesn't have to be as formal as a survey. It could just be a conversation you have. So I've said interviews or surveys, but conversations are great here too. Just talk to the people you have access to who are already in that group. World building, this is probably my favorite. I really like to consider who is this person that I'm trying to connect with, this audience group, and where do they spend their time? In the online sense, what kinds of Instagram or Facebook accounts might they be following? Go to those places and look at the comment sections and see if you can start to see what they're talking about and what they're doing. If you're in a small town and it's someone who's maybe not on social media so much, think about, okay, where might these people be hanging out? So again, if you're thinking about that volunteer group who are at retirement age, think about the places that they might be going. If they're retired, are they going to the library? Are they going to the bowling clubs and the ex-servos? Are they going to, the doctor's surgery fairly frequently? If they're a recent retiree that's new to the area, they've probably been through a real estate agent fairly recently. So think about, where they're spending their time, what cafes they might go to eat at, what events they might go to, and start to kind of get a picture of them just by imagining what their world looks like. And lastly, there's polling data and surveys available as well. So there are a simple place to start would be the Australian Bureau of Statistics, just going to their website and having a look at the different surveys and statistics and data they have available for different groups around Australia. There's another great site called YouGov, YOU YouGov, and they run surveys and polling that can give you an understanding of maybe how young people in Australia are feeling versus retirees. And that might just help you get a bit of a sense for these people. So a simple list of ways you can gather data. Um, like I said, you can distribute short feedback forms. You could have one-on-one conversations. If you do have social media accounts or platforms, you can do Instagram polls or Facebook surveys. Put up a Facebook post asking for feedback. You can organize focus groups. You can monitor social media comments, and you can attend community events. So, going to something like the Community Expo and just having a conversation with people, or watching who interacts with different groups. And off the back of that, collaborating with other community groups, saying, hey, I think, this other community group might be reaching the same kind of volunteers as us. Let's have a conversation and see what we can learn and share with each other. And yeah, these are just some simple ideas for how you could start to gather that data. Like I said before, it's totally okay to do this imperfectly. The idea is that you just get started and you refine this over time as you learn more. I've left this point in here that even the most expensive market research in the world doesn't get perfect results, but the more information that you get, the better you can become at understanding your audience. Okay, so what we're going to do now, this was a group exercise we ran together in the class in the workshop, but I want you to go to your worksheet now. I want you to choose just one of the audiences you've identified for your group, and I want you to start to answer this questionnaire. So I want you to pause this video and I want you to go and answer this questionnaire. Just answer as many questions as you can and skip the ones you don't know how to answer just yet. All right, hit pause. Okay, am I back? Excellent. I hope I'm back. All right. Um, okay, you've answered your questionnaire. Starting to develop a bit of an understanding of who this audience is, which is great. It's really exciting. But there are three really important things that I want you to consider as you start to refine your understanding of your audience. The first thing is subject awareness. Second is the messaging spectrum. Remember, I said I'd talk about that. And the third is disinformation narratives. So when I talk about subject awareness, what I mean is how familiar is your audience persona, your audience group, with your organization or your group, the topics you talk about and the issues that you help solve. So um, if we go back to our example from last week, a community group that helps parents of teens who are experiencing bullying. How much do they know about bullying? Have they experienced it before? Do they know the latest statistics about it? Have they encountered this problem before? And secondly, what terms resonate with this audience and what terms don't? So, is if you're always talking about resilience, is that a word that your audience actually knows what it means? If you're talking directly to the teens that group might help, do they know what resilience means? Is that a term that would resonate with them or not? So just start to think about those things. The messaging spectrum. This is something that I don't necessarily want you to think about too much at this point, but it's great to have in the back of your mind. The messaging spectrum is something that runs from subliminal messaging all the way through to informative messaging. Now, I'm not going to play these videos for you, but they are linked. And when we share the slides with you along with this video, you can click through and watch these if you want to. I selected these videos during the Kamala and Trump election. So last November of 2024. And all of these videos were in support of Kamala Harris. Okay. So the example of a subliminal piece of content that supports a, presidential election campaign was this video of a girl and she's just sitting in her car while some sad music plays. She's not saying anything. And she's just got this little image, which you might not be able to see, but I'll tell you what it says. It says, I will never forget that abortions were banned before AR-15s, which is a type of gun. So this is what I would classify as a subliminal piece of content or a subliminal piece of communication because she's not directly talking about Kamala Harris. She's not talking about the presidential election. She's not even necessarily saying who she would vote for. She's just saying that you can get a sense of the fact that she disagrees with certain policies of different politicians, right? So it's quite subliminal. Other examples of subliminal messaging can be humor, so comedy, and just things that are like quite indirect and passive. Going up to the awareness level, this video was a woman talking about all of Trump's felonies. And again, she wasn't talking about who she was voting for or why, but it's a little bit more personal or passionate because she's clearly stating what she does and doesn't agree with, right? So in this sort of tier of messaging, we're really looking at someone being a little bit more passionate or values led in showing their connection to your message. Then we move up to emotional. This video is a woman who has Tim Harris, who was Tim Walz, who was Kamala Harris's running vice president, which is her running mate. His speech at the Democratic National Convention about he and his wife struggles with infertility and their IVF journey. And she puts a compilation of videos about her own journey with infertility, all of the, pregnancy tests and her experience captured on video starts to overlay while Tim Walz is speaking. So this is very personal, passionate storytelling, and it's very clear that she is emotionally connecting to this candidate and to this message. Okay. And then there is informative, which is all the way at the other end of the spectrum, which is the active, literal, explanatory message. And this video is of a well-known influencer in the United States. And this is a video recap of her going to the Democratic National Convention. She's very clearly talking about how and why she supports Kamala Harris. And she's very connected to the campaign and literally explaining what's going on and why and how. So you can see this spectrum here. And the reason that I bring up the messaging spectrum and these examples is that when you are thinking about your audience, who you're trying to connect with, it's a really good idea to think about where on the messaging spectrum they might connect the most. So if there's someone who isn't quite sure that they they're ready to work with you directly, or that they're a really big fan of your work and they're converted and they want to do it, they might need something a bit more subliminal, or maybe something a bit more emotional to get them to take action with you. Okay. So if you're thinking always about how do I get someone to not just connect with me, but take action with us and do something with us, you need to consider what kind of messaging will they connect with best. And lastly, but really importantly, disinformation and misinformation. So what disinformation and misinformation narratives might they be exposed to, or what assumptions might they have, for in another way of speaking? So if we're talking about a community group who deals with supporting people who have experienced homelessness, and you're trying to get a volunteer or a donor to help, you might need to think about, does this audience group, are they exposed to some common misinformation like homelessness is only a big city problem and it's not something that I need to consider trying to solve in my small town? Most homeless people are addicts or mentally ill, and therefore it's dangerous for me to get involved as a volunteer. Or homeless people are mostly single men, and as a 65-year-old woman, I don't think I could really be of any help and I couldn't relate to them. Okay, which we know is not true, that the fastest growing group of people experiencing homelessness in Australia is women over 60. So what assumptions, what myths, what misinformation, what disinformation might this audience group that you're talking to be exposed to that you might have to help them overcome? Okay, so back to your worksheet. You've got uh, you've got your questionnaire filled out. I want you now to go back just thinking about these things of subject awareness, the messaging spectrum, and disinformation. Just again, working with that one audience group you've identified, and just jot down some thoughts on these 3 points. So I'll let you hit pause on the video now and then come back to me. Okay, I hope you're back now. Okay, so in the worksheet, you will see that the next, in the workbook, the next exercise is to do a content brainstorm. So, what I want you to do here is to have a little think about what stories might resonate with this audience group you've identified. What might they be interested in? What questions do they need answered about your work or your organization? And what do they need to know? So again, I don't need you to fill out the whole story here or, you know, answers to all the questions. Just take 5 minutes to think about, okay, with this audience group interacting with my community group, what questions might they need answered? And a really great way to start this is to think, well, what questions am I already always answering? So if you're talking to a volunteer group, um, maybe the questions you're always answering for them is how much time do I need to volunteer, or where do I volunteer? Do I need specific training to become a volunteer? What if I have to go away for a month? Can I still be a volunteer and just dip in and out? So have a think about the questions you're already being asked by this audience group and jot them down here. And then think about some of, the other things. What might they be interested in? What might connect with them? What stories might resonate? So just hit pause on the video again now. Just take 5 minutes and just have a go at just jotting down some ideas. Okay. The next thing that I want you to do is I want you to go back to our workshop from last week, our workshop 1, where we developed our brand story. And now that you know your audience a little bit better, you know what questions they have, you know what misinformation they might be exposed to, you know what level of subject awareness they have, you know where they might be on the messaging spectrum. You've got your whole questionnaire, to you've got your whole questionnaire that you've worked through. I want you to think about your brand story and how you might tailor it or tweak it to make it more suitable for this particular audience. Now, before you hit pause, I just want to say here that yes, it's absolutely okay to have multiple brand stories for different audiences, because the way that you talk about your brand to a donor is going to be very different to how you talk about your brand to the people that you help. Now, just remember, when I say brand, I am referring to your organization's personality, the way that people feel about you, the way that people see you. It's sort of just saying your brand's personality. I'm sorry, your group's personality is your brand. So yeah, have a little think about how you might want to tweak your brand story for this particular audience, and try tailoring it here. So hit pause now. Okay. Um, this process of tailoring your content is really where all of the magic happens. Yeah. So, this is the whole point in learning more about your audience. The more that you know about them, the more that you can, shape your communications in a way that they will resonate with. Um, so, a final consideration here. How do you make taking action even easier for your audience? So, I want to give an example from the workshop we did together. Um, we were talking about a community group that works with really vulnerable people in the community who might be experiencing homelessness and might need temporary, safe, and secure accommodation. Now, we were talking about how they, what is the action that we need, that audience group, that the group of people that are needing temporary urgent accommodation. How do they actually take action? So what's the process of finding out if there is a place for them to stay at this with this community group? And what we found was that the way that they got in contact was they sent an email, and the email was admin at. communityname.org, blah, blah, blah. And in conversation with the group, we realized that, well, now that we know more about this audience, one of the concerns that this audience has is that they might be afraid that if they reach out and ask for help, that it may affect how people perceive their ability to be a good parent, right? And so they might be particularly wary or afraid of anything that seems too official or, attached to the government, right? So having an email called admin might be really off-putting or scary or intimidating to that person. And the other thing is, if they need to send an email, the insights that we gathered about the group of people that this community group was helping, this organization was helping, was that often they would not have access to phone credit to be able to use the internet and send an email. So we thought, okay, well, how do we help them, take action more easily? Or maybe we could set up a free texting line, or we could set up a community fund. So if you go to certain venues, you can call, and a bit of money will support paying for those phone calls at certain community places around town. So this is where you get to be a bit creative and you get to think about all the ways that you are communicating with your audience, and you start to be, you really start to think about, okay, what am I asking them to do and how can I make it even easier for them? Okay. So this is tailoring content in action. It's everything from changing an email address from admin to tonight's a place to sleep tonight at something.com. Little simple things like that that just make it easy. Just to keep talking about that example from the group, one of the other things we talked about was changing the brand story or the communication that was around that call to action to call and find if there's any accommodation that night, to say we have a private entrance, because one of the things we learnt through doing the questionnaire was that a big barrier for this person who is this audience who is seeking accommodation is that they might feel shame or embarrassment about the fact that they need some temporary accommodation. They don't want to walk off the main street or the highway where people can see them entering that building. And so simply by just saying, hey, we have a private entrance where you can walk in privacy or security. Again, another reason that that's helpful is if someone is leaving a domestic violence situation and they might need that security. So what words can you add into your calls to action? What words can you use in your brand story or in your communications that tap into those fears and motivations of that audience group to to make them feel understood? Okay, so that's where tailoring starts to come into action. So do you see how understanding your audience more and really deeply considering their fears, their concerns, and their motivations helps you to tailor your content for them even more effectively? So that's a lot for us to go through in today's workshop. I'm going to pause here. I want you to remember that this is an imperfect art, and that what you have learnt today is something that you all need to come back to and refine over and over and over again. Your work as a communicator is based entirely on understanding who you're talking to. And so as we move through the next two workshops, you'll probably find more insights about your audience that you can come and put into these personas. Um, I'll stop my share here. So you'll probably keep developing these as you go. So just remember that it's okay if it's not perfect now. You will keep coming back and adding to this as the weeks go on, and as you continue working through on your communication over the next few years, you will keep refining this and refining and refining. That's the process of it. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, please send a note to the Community Connect team, and I can help answer that over email, or we'll get you answers to your questions. And I will see you in our next video. Okay, bye.